Välkomna allihopa. Vi ska prata om Thailand som vi precis hörde. Och det är ju verkligen ett av svenskarnas favoritresmål. 300 000 svenskar väntas åka till Thailand i år. Men det som många inte tänker på när de ligger där vid poolen är att de som städar rummen, tvättar lakanen och serverar mat på hotellen jobbar upp till 14 timmar om dagen och tjänar löner som inte räcker till ordentlig mat. Jag heter Maria och jobbar på Fair Action. Och vi granskar hur företag jobbar med arbetsvillkor i sin verksamhet runt om i världen. Och under många år har vi tillsammans med nätverket Schysst resande granskat arbetsvillkoren på hotell som Apollo, Fritidsresor och Ving använder i Thailand. I will now switch to English and introduce our panel. We have Kristina Henschen, General Secretary of Union to Union, which is also part of the Swedish Fair Travel Network, Schysst resande. We have Andy Hall, International Affairs Advisor for the Thai organization, Migrant Workers' Rights Network. And we have Min Ang Now, which used to work in the Thai tourism sector in Koh Phangan. Welcome. And also our translator, Anu. Welcome. So before we get into the discussions on the working conditions at the hotels where the Swedes stay during the winter, I would like to ask Andy, it's been quite a dramatic week for you. There was a verdict on Tuesday. Could you tell us about this case?
Yeah, on Tuesday, I work on migrant rights in Thailand. So on Tuesday, I was sentenced to 4 years in prison for the publication of a Finwatch report on migrant worker conditions in factories in Thailand. The sentence was reduced to 3 years because I cooperated with the court, and it was suspended because I was a human rights activist. But that sentence was for the publication of a research report in Helsinki about migrant worker conditions in tuna and pineapple factories, which I researched. So I was held liable, and I'm now on a suspended sentence for 2 years, and I had to pay a fine of about 4,000 euros. And that was simply because I was a researcher on a report looking into migrant worker conditions in factories that are exporting to Nordic countries.
So what are the consequences for other NGOs or researchers? Will people dare to look into the labor conditions of migrant workers?
Actually, I was convicted of a crime that I wasn't actually charged of. It was a bit of a strange process. And I was also convicted under Thailand's Computer Crimes Act, which criminalizes conduct using computers. So now it's a very difficult situation in Thailand for people doing research and for freedom of expression, because I was charged with being complicit in the act of Finwatch putting a report on the internet in Helsinki. So it's created a new crime of complicity in use of the Computer Crimes Act in Thailand. It really is going to have a chilling effect on freedom of expression in Thailand, and it's also really cast a huge shadow of doubt over the ability of migrant workers in Thailand to stand up and fight against the injustice they face. Because if I can be convicted of a criminal offence, it's very difficult for your average migrant worker to stand up and fight, because they feel they don't have any confidence now to be able to stand up and fight for their rights within the justice system in Thailand.
Yeah, like you just said, this court case is related to your work on migrant workers' rights, a topic you've been advocating for in several years. So what is your view on the working conditions for Burmese migrants at Thailand, hotels in Thailand?
So I started to get involved in migrant working conditions in Thailand's tourist sector because of a very well-known murder case. It was a murder on Koh Tao where 2 foreigners were murdered and 2 migrant workers were allegedly scapegoated for the crime. So we started to do research into conditions of migrant workers in the hotel sector. They're generally very poorly treated. So they have to work very, very long hours. They're generally not paid the minimum wage. They have their documents confiscated. They face debt bondage and even sometimes trafficking. If not, they're smuggled into the country. and they face many challenges related to their working conditions. They don't have clear contracts of employment, and they're really abused in a sector which is one of the second highest GDP earners for the country. So it's a really terrible situation when migrant workers are so systematically exploited within a tourism sector which is a part of our everyday life for people in Europe who are traveling to Thailand to relax and to enjoy themselves. But at the same time, the low costs of those kind of holidays have a big impact on the ability of workers to have good conditions in these kind of countries.
Min, you have been working in bars and restaurants and a hostel in Koh Phangan. What was a normal working day for you? How many hours did you work, for example?
I was there long 1 hours, about one day, 30 or 40 hours.
13, 14 hours, yeah.
Yes, please. And then we didn't get, how can I say, overtime. They didn't pay for me. So, long hours. And not pay legal payment.
Did you get any day off? Could you be free in the weekend or?
I got the amount of 2 days off a month.
So 2 days every month. So you work
Yes.
for 2 weeks and then you have 1 day off.
Yes, 2 weeks to 1 day off.
And what was your salary? Was it sufficient or how much did you earn?
They gave me start about the 7,000 baht. 7,000 baht. And somebody got about the 5,000 baht for 1 month.
And
not the same.
And from your friends, your Burmese friends that were working there, were there similar conditions for other people?
Yeah. Most people get like this.
Yeah. So Kristina, when you hear Andy and Min describing this situation for the migrants at the hotels, what is your reactions? Is this something you hear from trade unions and workers that you meet?
First, I want to say that what you have to understand to listen to this, that those who work for migrant rights in the world, they are heroes. What we see here on the stage here are 2 heroes working for migrant rights. Andy Hall, just sentenced to prison, suspended sentence though, but it's a unique and a new development in Thailand, a new step of repression in Thailand, and it's part of the movement around the world to shrinking the space for civil society. This is unacceptable. We see it all over the world. We see it in Russia, we see it in Belarus, we see it in China, we see it in Hungary, we see it now in Thailand, and we should not accept this. And when it comes to migrant rights, I mean, in the world we have 244 million migrants, and only about 50 million of those have a refugee status in accordance with the UNHCR criteria. So most of the migrants that we have in the world are trying to migrate because they have no choice, they have to survive, and it's fueled by the inequalities that we see in the world. And they often end up exactly as you describe, and in the fight that you have devoted your life to, Andy Hall, with bad conditions, low pay, long days, no day off, and they're extremely vulnerable and exploited. I have myself been visiting the center where Andy Hall works outside of Bangkok, and they do such a good job here, very, very important. And it's totally unacceptable with this new sentencing of fighters for migrant rights.
And why is it always why are the migrant workers so vulnerable? Why is it possible for the employers to have these kind of conditions?
Well, I would say that they are taken out of their context, and they are often deprived the same rights as the ones with citizenship in their own country. So this is a movement that, I mean, the amount of migrants that we will see, it's just the beginning that we are seeing now. We also have the flow of climate refugees or climate migrants that will increase tremendously for the coming years with the climate change and the new the effects of the situation where people cannot survive on their land. They cannot do what they traditionally do. They are, because of floodings and other climate change consequences, they have to migrate. Many become internal migrants in their countries. Others are forced to migrate abroad, and they are very, very vulnerable. And we have to take this seriously. And I'm very happy that the meeting in New York earlier last week, where the world's leaders met, they were actually discussing the issue of migration and refugees around the world. And we also see in the new agenda for the world, the Agenda 2030, for the first time, the world is actually taking this issue with migration very, very seriously. We have at least three goals that include references to migration, to ensure workers' rights, to ensure that the payment for remittances are not too high. They should be less than 3%, to ensure the migration, that they should be freedom of migration and freedom of movement. And this is very, very important that the world is now waking up and that the world is taking its responsibility, because we should also understand that actually the remittances, the amount of money that the migrants are sending home, are in total 3 times more than the world's development aid, development cooperation in money. So it's a tremendous amount of flow that goes from the migrants that are themselves working under this exploitation. So it has to be changed, and we have to comply with the new goals that we set together.
Min, what do you think, if I as a tourist want to go to Thailand this winter, is there anything or that the Sweden in general can do for the Burmese migrants?
So, how can I say? I think you should be tell to your government. Sweden's government gives some pressure for Thai government. And more better than, how can I say?
To put pressure, political pressure on.
That's more safety for you. I think if the Sweden government puts some pressure, more safety for you and more better than before.
Better for the tourists and better for the migrants. Mm. And the same question to you, Kristina. What do you think Swedish tourists should do?
Yeah, this is very, very important. We all want to have a nice vacation, right? But we have to take into consideration that in all those nice places, there are people being exploited. From Sweden to Thailand travels 320,000 Swedes every year for vacation. So we have an enormous consumer pressure here that we should actually use. We should put the questions to the travel agencies. Is this hotel working for decent conditions for their workers, including migrant workers? Take this as a challenge for each vacation to ask this question when you book your travel. And you will, if we all do that together, we will in the end make a change. And I would like to add that also the trade unions, of course, work tremendously to make sure that the rights of the migrant workers are respected to a greater extent. But it's also dangerous, not only for you fighters for migrant rights, but also for all the trade unionists that we see. They're being killed, they're being discriminated, they're being violated. So it's a very hard and rough fight that we are taking right now, but we should never give up.
So Kristina was saying that we should use consumer pressure to push the tour operators like Apollo, Fritidsresor and Ving that take the Swedish tourists to Thailand. But what do you think? What should the tour operators do? What is it that we want them to change?
If we look at the Nordic countries, I mean, something that Nordic countries can be very proud of in many ways is that they have this interest in responsible consumerism in many ways. You know, there's more interest in where the chicken come from, where the pineapple comes from, where the garments come from. You know, there seems to be fair trade, where the coffee comes from, where the bananas come from, and that's been something that's been increasing in the Nordic countries, and it's something that's really impressive. But that concept has never been applied to tourism, and many people are going overseas and having holidays, spending a lot of money, and they're not asking the questions about the conditions for the workers. So I think the tour operators in Finland, in Sweden, in Finland, in Norway, in Denmark, you know, they're really not doing enough for these issues, and I know Fair Action have been raising this issue for many years now, since 2013, to try and get the tour operators to take action, but they're not feeling any consumer pressure. They're not feeling any pressure from the buyers of the holidays. And I think that that's something that everyone here today can do. You know, we need to start raising these issues if we're going on holiday. What is the consequence of our holiday? Because we know also that the holidays are booked, you know, en masse, you know, especially the hotels where many Swedish tourists go. And they have a lot of bargaining power with the hotels to reduce the price. And when the price gets reduced, that can have a very negative impact on the rights of the migrant workers, the salaries they get. In Thailand, we see almost no freedom of association. I mean, I've been convicted for speaking out on behalf of migrant workers, but migrant workers themselves, they don't have any power or any ability or any resources to be able to fight to get better rights. We've seen that migrant workers in the tourist sector, if they stand up and they fight or they try to bargain for better conditions, they are marginalized. Sometimes they're arrested, sometimes they're put in jail. Sometimes they can even be killed if they stand up to fight for their rights, and they just disappear. So I think as consumers, as people who are going on holiday, as a society, as Nordic countries, we need to start looking at this issue of tourism and looking at the issue of responsible tourism and trying to find ways in which we can set up responsible tourism programs, ways in which we can ask questions of the tour operators to ensure that where we're going is a place that is responsible and that respects the rights. We've seen at the moment some very weak systems in place, or some very weak schemes to rate hotels in terms of the tourism sector, that these are hotels that respect rights, they respect the environment, but there's more concern on the environment, to be honest, than what there is on the workers. So now we're seeing more interest in environmental issues in the hotels that Swedes go overseas to look at, but not in the worker conditions. So I'd ask all of you and ask for the Nordic countries to put pressure on the tour operators, but also put pressure on the government, because the government can be part of this, and also put pressure on the development organizations to have more focus on the rights of workers, which are part of our holidays every year. Not to say that we shouldn't go on holiday and enjoy it, certainly we should. And we should go to Thailand. There's no need to boycott Thailand. We don't believe in boycotts, but we believe in putting pressure on the government and the tour operators and the hotels to make the life better. I mean, workers working sometimes 15, 16, 17 hours a day, sometimes only 1 day holiday a month, sometimes no holidays, sometimes 2 holidays, having their passports confiscated in situations of debt bondage, forced labour, human trafficking. This is not acceptable, and this is something that Thailand needs to address.
And you said there have been positive experiences of pressure in other sectors, such as you mentioned just before in the fishing vessels. Can you tell us something about that, that it's possible to make changes?
Now we're working this week. I'm in Stockholm, and many of the retailers, many of the buyers want to meet with me to discuss the conditions of workers in the poultry sector. Now there's massive pressure from the EU on the illegal, unreported and unregistered fishing, the IUU fishing. We've seen a lot of pressure from the European Union on the products that are coming out of Thailand into our markets. It started off with just food safety, and now it's becoming social issues, labour issues. So it shows that if the pressure is put there, then these things can really be successful, and we can see the lives of workers getting better. We've seen that in Thailand. We've seen the pressure from the European Union, from the countries in Europe, for better conditions related to the products that are coming out of Thailand, and we've seen significant improvements. So it shows that in the tourist sector, if we put pressure, if we create some kind of responsible tourism programs, if we put pressure on the tour operators, we can definitely bring change.
Thank you. With that, we'll have to end this discussion. Thank you very much to Min and Andy and Kristina and Anu. And our guests will be in the union-to-union monitor if you have questions, so you can talk to them there. Thank you also to all you who came to listen. Thank you.
Thank you.